3 weeks after the trial, as autumn painted the kingdom in shades of crimson and gold, Cassie stood in the armory, watching Adrian prepare for their journey east. He was strapping on lightweight armor, designed for speed and mobility rather than ceremony. "You don't have to come," he said for the 3rd time that morning, though his tone lacked conviction. The bond between them hummed with his true feelings. He desperately wanted her by his side, but feared for her safety. Cassie finished braiding her wheat-colored hair and met his amber eyes in the polished shield hanging on the wall. "Your sword needs its shield, remember?" Her voice, still a marvel after years of silence, carried quiet determination. "Besides, I have a theory about these rogues." Marcus entered, fully armed and accompanied by a contingent of their best warriors. "The horses are ready, your majesties. We should reach the eastern farmlands by nightfall if we leave now." The journey took them through increasingly wild terrain. The polished roads of the capital gave way to dirt paths, then to forest trails where ancient pines blocked out the sun. Cassie rode beside Adrian on a gentle mare named Moonlight, while Marcus and 20 royal guards formed a protective circle around them. As they traveled, Cassie noticed something the others missed. Small signs in the wilderness, broken branches at specific angles, stones arranged in peculiar patterns. They weren't random. They were markers, a trail. "Adrian," she called softly, pulling Moonlight to a stop. She pointed to a tree where 3 deep claw marks scored the bark, but not in the wild slashing of a feral attack. These were deliberate, measured. "Look," he dismounted, examining the marks with his enhanced senses. His wolf stirred uneasily. "These are fresh, less than a day old." His eyes scanned the darkening forest. "But you're right. This wasn't made in rage. Someone is leaving us a path." "Or a warning," Marcus added grimly, hand on his sword. They reached the village of Millbrook as the sun bled red across the horizon. What greeted them stole the breath from Cassie's lungs. The village wasn't just damaged, it was terrorized. Homes bore claw marks and scorch marks. The town square's well had been poisoned, the water turned brackish and foul. But worst of all were the people. They huddled in their homes, pale and frightened, jumping at every sound. When Adrian dismounted, several of them actually cowered, even though he was their king and had come to help them. An elderly woman, the village elder named Marta, approached with a shaking curtsy. "Your Majesty, thank the moon goddess you've come. They attack almost every night now. We've lost livestock, homes, and—" Her voice broke. "3 villagers last week." "Tell me everything," Adrian commanded, but his alpha authority only made the woman flinch. Cassie dismounted and approached gently, taking the woman's weathered hands in hers. The elder's fear scent was overwhelming. Not just fear of the rogues, but old fear, deep fear. The kind that lived in bones and blood. "Marta," Cassie said softly, her voice carrying the soothing resonance of her omega power. Immediately, the woman's shoulders relaxed slightly. "We're here to help, but I need you to trust me. These attacks, are the rogues trying to kill, or are they trying to communicate?" The question surprised everyone, including Adrian, whose head snapped toward her. Marta blinked, considering. That's the strange thing, Your Majesty. They could kill us easily. They're massive, stronger than any wolf I've ever seen. But it's like they're hurting us, keeping us afraid, keeping us trapped. "Keeping you contained," Cassie murmured, pieces falling into place. She looked at Adrian. "This isn't random violence. Someone is controlling them." Chapter 2. The First Encounter. That night, Cassie insisted on taking the first watch despite every protective instinct in Adrian's body screaming against it. They'd set up camp in the village square, where their presence might deter an attack. "If they're being controlled," she explained, sitting beside him near the fire, "then they're prisoners too. Victims, not villains. I need to see them myself." "Cassie," Adrian's voice was strained, his hand covering hers. "These victims have killed 3 people." I know. Her pale blue eyes reflected firelight. But you taught me that a king, or queen, must see beyond the surface. You saw past a silent kitchen servant. Let me see past the monster. He couldn't argue with his own lesson, so when the attack came 2 hours past midnight, as the moon hung fat and silver in the sky, Adrian held his position while Cassie stepped forward. The rogues emerged from the forest like living shadows. 5 of them, massive and malformed, their wolves twisted into something between beast and nightmare. Their eyes glowed an unnatural red, and foam flecked their muzzles. They moved with jerky, puppet-like motions, as if their bodies didn't quite belong to them. The royal guards formed a defensive line, weapons drawn. Adrian's wolf surged forward, ready to shift and tear these creatures apart for threatening his mate. But Cassie walked past the guards. "Cassie, no!" Adrian lunged for her, but Marcus grabbed his arm. "Trust her," Marcus said, though his own face was white with fear. "Trust your queen." Cassie approached the nearest rogue, a massive gray wolf that towered over her. It snarled, snapping its jaws, but something in its red glowing eyes wasn't quite right. Beneath the aggression, she saw something else. Pain, confusion, desperation. She began to hum. It wasn't a song with words, but a resonance, a vibration that came from the ancient power in her blood. The hymn of unity, the power that had soothed the entire pack in the throne room, now focused on 5 tortured souls. The effect was immediate and startling. The lead, Rogue's snarling, faltered, its jerky movements smoothed. For just a moment, its eyes flickered from red to natural amber, and in that moment Cassie saw the wolf beneath the curse. A warrior, proud and strong, trapped in his own body. Then the red flared back, brighter and angrier. The rogue howled, a sound of such anguish it made several guards cover their ears. It wasn't attacking. It was warning her. "Get back! Run! I can't control it much longer. Someone is doing this to you," Cassie breathed, understanding clicking into place. "Someone is forcing you to attack." The rogue's body convulsed, fighting against invisible chains. Then, as if yanked by a leash, all 5 rogues turned and fled back into the forest, their movements once again jerky and wrong. Adrian was at Cassie's side instantly, pulling her back, checking her for injuries. "Are you insane? They could have killed you." "No," she said firmly, still staring at the tree line where they'd disappeared. "They couldn't. Someone won't let them. Someone needs them alive to terrorize this village." She turned to Marcus. "Send scouts. I want to know where they're going when they're not attacking." "There's something else," Marta said, emerging from her hiding place. "There's an old compound, about 5 miles north. It used to be a military outpost, abandoned 20 years ago after the last border war. Some travelers say they've seen lights there at night." Cassie and Adrian exchanged looks. "We investigate at first light," he decided. Chapter 3. The Compound. The abandoned compound was a sprawling collection of stone buildings, overgrown with vines and surrounded by a crumbling wall. But as they approached, it became clear it wasn't as abandoned as it appeared. The scent of wolf was everywhere, but underneath it something else. A chemical smell, sharp and wrong. Magic, but twisted, corrupted. Adrian held up a hand, signaling the guards to fan out. He and Cassie, with Marcus, approached the main building carefully. The door hung open, creaking in the wind. Inside they found a laboratory of horrors. Cages lined the walls, some empty, some containing wolves in various states of transformation. These weren't rogues. They were normal wolves, kidnapped from their packs, subjected to experiments. Vials of glowing red liquid sat on tables next to ancient texts and alchemical equipment. "Moon goddess," Marcus breathed, his face twisted in disgust. Cassie approached one of the caged wolves, a young female who cowered in the corner. Her eyes were starting to show that telltale red glow. They're trying to create an army, Cassie whispered. Not of rogues, but of controlled soldiers. Wolves with no will of their own. But why attack the villages? Adrian demanded, examining the texts. His expression darkened as he read. These are old council records. Plans for expansion. Forced annexation of the Eastern Territories. A slow clap echoed through the chamber. They spun to find a figure emerging from the shadows. A man in dark robes, his face hidden by a hood. But his voice was chillingly familiar. Very perceptive, Your Majesty, the man said, pulling back his hood to reveal features that made Cassie's blood run cold. It was Lord Harrington's younger brother, Edmund Harrington, a man supposedly killed in a hunting accident 5 years ago. You're dead, Marcus said flatly. Officially, yes. Conveniently, yes. Edmund smiled, and it was a cruel expression. My brother was always the political face of our family's ambition. I was the strategist, the one willing to get his hands dirty. When his plot failed, I activated our contingency plan. You're creating monsters to terrorize your own people, Adrian snarled, his wolf pushing forward. Why? Because a kingdom in chaos needs a strong hand to control it. My brother tried to install Victoria as your mate, to control you through her. That failed. So now I'll create a crisis so severe that the Council will have no choice but to grant me emergency powers. And your little Omega Queen, his eyes fixed on Cassie with hatred, will be revealed as too weak to protect them. They'll beg for a return to pure Alpha rule. He raised his hand, where a red crystal pulsed with malevolent light. These rogues answer to me alone. They'll attack, and attack, and attack, until the Eastern Territories are so devastated they'll accept any ruler who can stop the violence. And that will be me. You'll die first, Adrian growled, beginning to shift. I think not. Edmund raised the crystal higher. The 5 rogues from the previous night emerged from the shadows, flanking him, along with a dozen more. Their eyes glowed red, fixed on Adrian and Cassie with predatory focus. Kill the king, capture the queen. She'll be useful leverage. The rogues attacked. Chapter 4. The Battle. What followed was chaos. Adrian shifted mid-leap, his massive silver wolf form exploding into being. He was magnificent, a creature of legend, all rippling muscle and gleaming fur. He tore into the first rogue with savage efficiency. Marcus and the guards fought desperately, but they were outnumbered. These rogues were stronger, faster, fueled by Edmund's twisted magic. Cassie found herself backed against a wall, 3 rogues advancing on her. But she didn't panic. Instead, she closed her eyes and reached deep into the power she'd only just begun to understand. The hymn of unity erupted from her, not as a gentle hum, but as a clarion call, a command that resonated with the very essence of what it meant to be wolf. It didn't just soothe, it called them home, reminded them of who they truly were beneath the corruption. One by one, the rogues faltered. Their red eyes flickered. Some collapsed, whimpering, fighting against Edmund's control. Others turned, snarling not at Cassie, but at Edmund himself. No, Edmund screamed, the crystal in his hand flaring brighter. Obey me, I command you. But Cassie's voice was stronger. It was the voice of a queen, yes, but more than that. It was the voice of the first Omega, the life-giver, the one who reminded wolves that they were not just beasts of fang and claw, but creatures of pack and family and belonging. The largest rogue, the gray warrior who had warned her the night before, broke free of Edmund's control entirely. His eyes cleared to natural amber. He turned toward Edmund with a look of pure, justified rage. Edmund's confidence crumbled into terror. Stay back, I command you. The freed wolf didn't listen. He lunged. Adrian, seeing what was happening, shifted back to human form and caught Cassie as she swayed, drained from the massive expenditure of power. I've got you, he murmured, holding her close. Marcus and the guards quickly subdued Edmund, smashing the crystal and binding him in silver chains. The remaining rogues, freed from his control, collapsed in exhaustion or fled into the forest. The gray wolf approached Cassie slowly, cautiously. Up close, she could see the scars covering his body, the evidence of torture and forced transformation. He lowered his massive head in a gesture of submission and gratitude. Cassie reached out, placing her hand on his muzzle. "You're free now," she whispered. "All of you. You're free." The wolf's eyes closed, and a single tear tracked down through his fur. Chapter 5. Healing? The liberation of the compound revealed the true scope of Edmund's operation. 43 wolves had been kidnapped over the past year, subjected to his experiments. Some were too far gone, their minds shattered beyond repair. Those Adrian granted a merciful death, a release from their torment. But others, like the Grey Wolf, whose name they learned was Garrett, a former captain of the Northern Guard who'd been reported killed in a rogue attack, could be saved. Cassie spent days in the compound, using her healing powers to cleanse the corruption from their systems. It was exhausting work, draining her to the point of collapse each night. But she refused to stop. "You're going to burn yourself out," Adrian warned one evening, finding her slumped against a cage, pale and trembling. "They were turned into weapons against their will," she said softly. "Someone has to give them back their voices, their choices. Isn't that what you gave me?" He couldn't argue with that. Garrett recovered enough to speak, and his testimony was damning. Edmund had been working on this for years, building a network of sympathizers who believed Omega powers were an abomination, that only pure alpha strength should rule. The Eastern attacks were just the beginning. He'd planned to expand, to create an army of controlled rogues that would let him conquer not just Crimson Vale, but neighboring kingdoms. "There are others," Garrett rasped, his voice still rough from months without speaking. "Other compounds, other prisoners. He had partners, supporters in high places." Cassie and Adrian exchanged grim looks. This wasn't over. Edmund's trial was swift and brutal. Chained before the throne, he showed no remorse, only bitter rage that a worthless Omega had destroyed his plans. "You want to know the truth?" he spat at Cassie. "My brother was a fool, but he was right about one thing. This kingdom needs alpha strength, not Omega weakness. You're an anomaly, an aberration. That power of yours, it makes wolves soft, makes them forget their place in the natural order. Alphas conquer, Omegas submit. That's how it's always been." Cassie stood, walking down from the dais to face him directly. "No," she said simply. "Alphas protect. Omegas heal. And together we create something stronger than either could alone. You're not afraid of weakness, Edmund. You're afraid of balance, because in a balanced kingdom, men like you have no place." She turned to Adrian. "He wanted to create an army? Let's give him a taste of his own creation. Let him live the rest of his life in the body of those he tortured." It was a sentence, both merciful and terrible. Using the corrupted magic they'd found in the compound, the royal alchemists, under strict supervision, transformed Edmund into a wolf, permanently. But unlike his victims, he retained his human mind, trapped in a beast's body, unable to speak, unable to scheme. He would spend his days in a sanctuary Cassie established, cared for but contained, a living reminder of the cost of cruelty. Chapter 6. New Alliances. With Edmund defeated and his network being systematically dismantled, Cassie turned her attention to the freed rogues. Many had nowhere to return to. Their original packs thought them dead, or were too scattered to find. "They need a place," she said to Adrian one evening as they stood in the rebuilt Millbrook Square. The village was recovering, fear giving way to hope. "A purpose?" "What are you thinking?" he asked, though he already suspected. "A new pack. Not traditional, not bound by bloodlines or territory, but by choice. Those who've been broken and want to help others who are breaking. A pack of healers, protectors, those who understand what it means to lose everything and fight to get it back. Adrian smiled. The Queen's Guard. The Moon's Refuge, she corrected. A place for the lost. I want Garrett to lead it. Garrett, when offered the position, wept. He'd been a captain once, proud and strong. Edmund had reduced him to a mindless weapon. Now, a queen who barely knew him was offering him not just redemption, but purpose. I won't let you down, he vowed, kneeling before her. I know, Cassie said, helping him to his feet. Because you've already proven that even in your darkest moment, you held on to who you were. That's not weakness, Garrett. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen. The Moon's Refuge was established in a rebuilt compound, transformed from a place of torture into a sanctuary. It would serve multiple purposes. A healing center for traumatized wolves, a training ground for those learning to control difficult transformations, and a base for a new kind of guardian. Wolves who specialized in finding and freeing others trapped like they'd been. The Eastern Territories stabilized. Villages that had lived in terror for months began to thrive again. And everywhere Cassie went, she was greeted not with the fear and resentment she'd faced at court, but with genuine love and gratitude. Chapter 7. The Return. Their return to the capital was triumphant. Word of Cassie's actions had spread. The Omega Queen who'd freed enslaved wolves, who'd used compassion as a weapon more powerful than any sword. But not everyone was pleased. A faction of traditional alphas, led by a duchess named Ravenna, had been growing bold in their absence. She awaited them in the throne room, surrounded by supporters, her expression calculated and cold. Your Majesties, Ravenna said with a curtsy that somehow managed to convey insult. How wonderful that you've returned. We've been discussing the Eastern situation in your absence. Have you? Adrian's voice was dangerously soft. Indeed, and while we're grateful the immediate crisis is resolved, many of us are concerned about the precedent being set. A sanctuary for rogues? Training them? Some might call it building a private army. Cassie felt Adrian's anger through their bond, but she placed a calming hand on his arm. Duchess Ravenna, she said pleasantly, I understand your concern. It's natural to fear what we don't understand. But the wolves at Moon's Refuge aren't rogues. They're victims we've freed. And they're not my private army. They've pledged themselves to the crown, to both of us. Still, Ravenna pressed, an Omega Queen with her own force of loyal wolves, powerful enough to break Edmund Harrington's control? Some might see that as a threat to the natural order. The natural order? Cassie's voice remained gentle, but steel crept into it. Tell me, Duchess, what is natural about kidnapping and enslaving our people? What is natural about using torture to create weapons? Because that was the natural order Edmund Harrington wanted to preserve. A world where strength was measured only in dominance and fear. She stood, walking down from the throne to face Ravenna directly, just as she had with Edmund. I am an Omega, yes. That will never change. But I am also your queen. And my power isn't a threat to alphas who rule with honor and justice. It's only a threat to those who confuse cruelty with strength. The room was silent. Several of Ravenna's supporters had the decency to look uncomfortable. Adrian arose to stand beside Cassie, a united front. If anyone takes issue with how the Queen and I rule this kingdom, they're welcome to bring their concerns to us directly. But if I hear whispers of sedition, of plots against my mate or her work, they will be treated as treason. Are we clear? Ravenna's mask slipped for just a moment, showing fear beneath the calculation. Crystal, Your Majesty. That night, alone in their chambers, Adrian pulled Cassie into his arms. You were magnificent today. I was terrified, she admitted. Ravenna is smart. She's planting seeds of doubt. Let her plant. You're growing a forest. He kissed her forehead. Every wolf you save, every village you heal, every heart you change. That's real power. That's lasting power. Ravenna operates in shadows and whispers. You operate in light. Cassie smiled against his chest. My poetic king. Your devoted king, he corrected, who is constantly amazed by you. She tilted her face up to his. The feeling is mutual. Their kiss was interrupted by a knock at the door. Marcus entered with an apologetic expression. Sorry to disturb, but we've received word. Another compound has been found, this time in the southern marshlands, and this one is still operational. Cassie and Adrian looked at each other. They'd known this wasn't over, but facing it again so soon was daunting. How many prisoners? Cassie asked. Unknown, but the messenger said dozens, maybe more. She straightened, exhaustion falling away. Then we leave at dawn. Cassie, Adrian began. No, she said firmly. This is what I was meant to do. That power you spoke of? The one Harrington wanted destroyed? This is why it exists. Not to control, but to free. Not to dominate, but to heal. She looked at Marcus, at Adrian, at the door beyond which lay a kingdom still healing from centuries of imbalance. Edmund was right about one thing. I am going to change the natural order. Because the natural order that allowed him to exist needs to change. Epilogue. A new dawn. 6 months later, the 4th compound was liberated. The Moon's Refuge had grown to house over 200 freed wolves, with Garrett as its commander and Sophie, Cassie's old friend from the kitchens, as his second, having discovered her own gift for healing magic. The traditional alphas were divided. Some, like Ravenna, continued their subtle resistance. But others, seeing the results of Cassie's work, began to support her. The Eastern Territories were the most prosperous they'd been in decades. Wolves who had been enemies for generations were learning to work together. And through it all, Cassie and Adrian stood together. The Silver Wolf King and his silent-turned singing queen, proving that the strongest bonds weren't forged in dominance, but in balance. Cassie stood on the balcony where she'd first been claimed, looking out at the kingdom she'd never imagined she'd help rule. Behind her, Adrian wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her head. Do you ever miss it? He asked softly. The quiet. The simplicity? She considered the question seriously. Sometimes, she admitted. But then I think about Garrett, about Sophie, about all the wolves who have their voices back because I found mine. And I realized that silence was never peace. It was just fear with nowhere to go. And now? Now I'm loud, she said with a smile, terrifyingly, inconveniently loud. He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest into her back. Good. The world needs to hear you. In the distance, from the direction of Moon's Refuge, a howl rose into the night. Then another, and another. Not the tortured screams of Edmund's victims, but the joyful song of free wolves, calling to the moon that had guided them home. Cassie tilted her head back and added her own voice to the chorus. Not a howl, but a note of pure, resonant peace that wove through the others like silver thread through tapestry. The silent Omega had found her voice, and she was using it to sing the world into something better. The story of Cassie and Adrian continues, a legend still being written. For in the Crimson Veil Kingdom, a new age had dawned, not of alphas or omegas alone, but of balance, of healing, of power tempered by compassion. And at its heart beat 2 souls who proved that the most unexpected love could change the world.